Ikuto was an ugly moron who was mistreated by his father, so he ran away to a ship. However, after he fell overboard in a storm, he found himself washed up on an island full of thirsty girls who won't let him go back home so they can keep using his sausage.
Well, if you wanted a closer look, you could have just asked.
It all started the day one of the islanders named Suzu caught him while fishing. She immediately began to panic and decided to do a CPR on him, which immediately fried his brain because that was the first time he would ever kiss a girl. Afterward, she dragged the half-drowned dude to her grandma, who immediately switched into nursing mode and started treating him. Meanwhile, a bunch of curious women gathered like nosy neighbors to check out who this mysterious creature was because none of them had ever seen a real-life dude before. Suzu poked at his chest and asked why it was as flat as her backside, only for Grandma to drop the bomb that he was a guy, and boom, everybody lost their minds. Turns out, every single human on that island was a woman, and not a single one of them had ever laid eyes on a man. Later on, when Ikuto finally regained consciousness, he was beyond thrilled, thinking he had made it back to Japan after his Titanic encounter. But Granny hit him with another plot twist. They were technically Japanese, but no one had a single clue where the heck this mystery island was. Apparently, the whole girl gang had washed up there ages ago and had been stranded ever since. Trying to be helpful, Suzu offered him a bath. The guy had barely gotten his shirt off and stepped into the water when Suzu popped in and casually asked to bathe with him, shocking him. Things escalated further when another girl named An waltzed in and joined the soap opera. The poor boy's brain overheated from all the plot, and he blacked out from too much excitement. Not long after, all the thirsty girls on the island started chasing him like he was a limited edition PlayStation 5. They all wanted a piece of his sausage, and the poor boy had to sprint like his future kids depended on it. After running for his life, he finally screamed, asking why on God's green earth he was being hunted like a prized animal. Granny calmly explained that he was the first and only dude on the island in decades. Ikuto was flabbergasted. Now, instead of embracing the harem life like a true degenerate protagonist, Ikuto decided to activate his inner Sigma male and build a boat, declaring that he was going to escape this thirst trap island. Shockingly, the girls didn't even try to stop him. He was halfway into writing a thank you speech in his head when the ocean pulled an Uno reverse card on him. A random whirlpool grabbed his canoe and slammed him back on the same beach he had left. Granny popped up again and calmly said that leaving was kinda impossible. Hearing the word impossible triggered his unresolved daddy issues because his father had always called him a failure. Determined to prove him wrong, Ikuto went full anime montage mode and tried escaping repeatedly, only to fail again and again. Eventually, he came up with a genius plan after figuring out the whirlpool's pattern. But just as he was about to test it out, a massive dolphin came out of nowhere and yeeted him straight into the ocean. Suzu dove in immediately and swam to save his soggy behind. She eventually dragged him out of the water and told him that the dolphin actually saved him from a mega whirlpool that would have sent him to the afterlife. After that near-death adventure, she smiled and welcomed him to Eren 2, his new home. After that, Suzu went full National Geographic and explained that men once roamed the island. But then a once-in-a-century tsunami came through and Thanos snapped every last one of them into oblivion. Hearing this, Ikuto had a lightbulb moment and thought maybe the next tsunami would be his ticket out of this estrogen-packed prison. But Suzu quickly rained on his fantasy, telling him not to get too excited, because the next tsunami would be about 107 years away. Later that night, just as Ikuto was preparing to clock out for the day, things took a wild turn. Out of nowhere, the island's entire female population decided to storm into his space, each one ready to claim the sacred sausage, freaking him out. That's when the old hag of the village calmly explained that the women's urges had finally awakened, and their floodgates were wide open, so they wanted him to do some plumbing with his pipe. But to prevent a pleasure apocalypse, Granny pulled a plot-saving idea from her ancient bag of wisdom, saying there would be a hide-and-seek showdown the next day. Whoever found him first would win the holy sausage. By the next morning, the challenge started, and Ikuto ran like he hated clapping, dodging all the thirsty girls as much as he could. Meanwhile, Suzu was also chasing along to prevent him from being caught. As she ran, she saw Akane from afar, and Akane, who obviously didn't get the memo on what was happening, prepared to fight her again to settle their unfinished business. But Suzu just used her face as a trampoline and bounced. Eventually, the girls began closing in on him, but Suzu started snatching them away one by one. And in a desperate move, Ikuto leapt off a cliff before realizing that the girls were no more. Luckily, he grabbed onto the edge of another cliff. But just as he was about to pull himself up, he saw yet another girl waiting to claim victory. Rather than risk being clutched into commitment, he went full send into the river below. The current carried him until he was headed straight for a scenic death at the bottom of a waterfall. Seeing this, Suzu pulled a stunt double move and dove after him. But before she could reach him, a random girl with a flying oversized chicken intercepted and scooped him up. Sadly for her, he screamed because heights weren't his thing. So she dumped him mid-air like expired milk. He crash-landed in the eastern forest, which was the same place Granny had earlier warned them not to go. The carnivorous plants wasted no time trying to turn him into fertilizer. But just before he was converted into a snack, Suzu arrived again and saved his weak behind. She reached out to help him up, but as he stretched his hand toward hers, it hit him as touching her meant she'd win the hide-and-seek tournament, so he dipped immediately. The great sausage chase continued, and somehow, the unlucky hero ended up in a tree. The girls climbed after him like zombies until Akane whipped out some gas that knocked everyone out cold. Ikuto, however, managed to yeet her into the river, and when he thought it was finally over because the sun was setting, the granny came and casually declared Suzu the winner, leaving him wondering how. Turns out, he'd accidentally touched Suzu's melon earlier when she was saving him from becoming plant food, but Suzu declined because he was broke and short. She added that she wasn't going to force him, and would patiently wait for him to pick the lucky lady he actually liked. The next day, while Ikuto rampaged through his school bag, Suzu found what she thought was a magical box, only to realize it was just an off-brand Android phone. She called it beautiful, leaving Ikuto completely baffled. Bro finally understood he had landed on an island where the people still worshipped fire and thought a power bank was a demonic relic. A few moments later, Suzu stood up to go fetch water, and Ikuto, being the overconfident gentleman he was, offered to help, not knowing he was about to take the biggest L of his life. Dude could barely lift the buckets without shaking like a leaf, while Suzu lifted hers like she was born doing push-ups in the womb. Ikuto tried to save face by grumbling about how heavy it was, but that little dignity left in him evaporated when another girl named Rin strolled past with a mega bucket. With his pride now 6 feet under, he tried to carry the water like a real man and sprinted away, only to collapse not far away. As the girls called him soft, Rin's sister Mikoto showed up, acting like the side character no one asked for. Ikuto tried to hold on to what was left of his charm, but Suzu hit him with the cold truth. Mikoto wouldn't look twice at him even if he was on fire. The duo continued with the day's chores, and just when Ikuto thought it couldn't get worse, they hit the farm for some manual labor. They tried digging up potatoes, and Ikuto claimed he had ultra instinct and could dig up the entire farm with one pinky. Reality, however, kicked him in the back when he barely made a dent in the ground. Suzu joined in, and they finally pulled out a potato the size of Nikki's bunda, making Ikuto realize that everything on this island was on steroids. Later, they went to another farm spot that looked like it was growing oversized mushrooms. Suzu casually walked over and plucked one like it was a leaf, prompting Ikuto to think this was his moment to finally flex. So, of course, he jumped on the biggest mushroom he could find and tried to yank it out. But he soon discovered it was a bad idea. The mushroom came to life and tried to eat him for dinner, but later spat his manga form out before wilting away. Suzu casually mentioned that some mushrooms were actually monsters, but would conveniently drop dead after biting someone. Ikuto, now traumatized and mildly chewed, asked her how to avoid getting eaten alive again, and Suzu told him something vague that even she didn't fully understand. The girls then told him to trust his instincts, which, in Ikuto's case, were clearly manufactured by clowns. Still desperate to win over the girls who didn't even rate him as much, he dove headfirst into his instincts and started testing mushrooms like he was doing a toxicology exam. Sadly, Bro turned out to be the mushroom Grim Reaper, as every single one he picked tried to bite his face off. One of the girls pointed out that while it was impossible for him to find good mushrooms, he was a pro at identifying fake ones. The moment she said the word impossible, his childhood trauma was triggered and fueled by emotional damage and the desperation to prove the girl wrong. He started yanking mushrooms like a madman until every single fake mushroom was eliminated. The girls gave him a pity clap and told him he was kinda useful. which only deepened his existential crisis. He realized he was officially the most useless male protagonist in anime history and considered getting benched to the NPC role. While he sulked over this, Rin approached him and, seeing that he was down, she thought this was her moment to get him to be her husband. So she grabbed his hand and gave him a free trial of her exclusive plot, immediately giving him a brain seizure. However, Yukino appeared at that moment to ruin the moment. Later that evening, Suzu admired him and told him she actually enjoyed living with him because she had always felt alone. Ikuto's broken ego was momentarily patched up, and for the first time that day, he smiled like he was now in the better part of the story. A few days later, An gobbled down Machai's rice cakes without thinking and became scared when she realized it, and took off like a criminal on the run. Meanwhile, Suzu and Ikuto were on radish delivery duty at the Sea Dragon Shrine. While Suzu wandered off somewhere, Machai suddenly dropped out of nowhere and told Ikuto she was hunting her sister, An. Suzu showed up just in time to hear that Machai was willing to cough up 20 rice cakes in exchange for some sibling hunting services. And because Suzu was basically a rice cake addict, she accepted without hesitation and zoomed into the forest. There, she started rigging up a trap while Ikuto stood beside her, more confused than ever. Once the trap was ready, Suzu climbed a nearby cliff and hollered that An's chest looked like a poorly made ironing board. That statement summoned An immediately, proving Suzu might just be an evil genius. But before Suzu could catch her, An escaped like a professional escape artist on her pet mutant bird, dragging poor Ikuto along for the ride. Just when they thought they were free, Suzu popped up again, ready to catch her target. An quickly tried to bribe her with 30 rice cakes this time, but only if Suzu could dig up Machai's deepest, darkest weakness. Suzu was sold instantly and sprinted off to interrogate half the island. But her detective work turned out to be a total flop. Later, as she reported her tragic findings to An, the gremlin started throwing shade at her sister, calling her an old, lonely, crusty hag who couldn't even flirt with a scarecrow. Unfortunately for her, Machai overheard everything and immediately went into an emotional spiral. Realizing she'd struck gold, An doubled down on the insults, but her victory didn't last long, because Machai snapped, activated her dark sorcery powers, and gave her a magical beatdown she wouldn't forget. Later that day, while Suzu and Ikuto were heading home, Suzu tripped over her own legs and shattered a sacred Ojizo statue. Panicking because the statue was said to house a demonic spirit, she started shaking. Ikuto, being the proud member of the I Only Believe in Science fan club, just patched the old statue back together like a budget archaeologist and told her to chill. As they walked away, the statue's eyes ominously lit up, unknowingly to them. From that moment, Suzu was convinced the spirit had set its sights on her soul, so she became terrified by it so much that she couldn't enjoy her peace. And of course, An being the menace she was found out and decided this was the perfect opportunity to mess with her. But just as she got ready to launch her prank campaign, the actual spirit pulled a surprise appearance, scaring the madness out of her and sending her straight into a blackout. Ikuto heard her death scream and came outside, only to find her lying on the ground. She mumbled something about ghosts and hauntings, but Ikuto brushed it off like it was some bedtime story nonsense. He went back inside, only to walk in on Suzu being held hostage by a floating plushy demon with attitude. Still unfazed, Ikuto calmly faced the spirit. The ghost tried to go full final boss mode, but Ikuto shut it down with a one-punch special straight out of Saitama's playbook. And then, he patted the spooky thing on the head, saying it was lonely and promising to tell everyone that it was not a ghost. He later sent the demon away peacefully, still refusing to believe in spirits even after it disappeared right in front of him. A few weeks later, Yukino barged into her jam shop only to catch this obese, cocoa-colored furball named Kuma digging into the jelly stash like he hadn't eaten in 40 years. She immediately called him a tub of lard and a shameless chowhound, comparing him to Suzu, which made him mad instantly. After the drama, the bear disappeared, and Yukino lost her cool trying to find him. So, she went to nag Ikuto and Suzu to help track him. They decided to form two search squads. Yukino dragged Ikuto into one group, while Suzu teamed up with the bootleg zoo animals that trailed after Yukino. As Yukino and Ikuto wandered into the woods, they stumbled upon some chunky paw prints in the dirt that looked suspiciously like Kuma's fat feet. Thinking they were onto something, they followed the trail, only to end up face to face with another oversized bear that looked like Kuma's clone and had the same bottomless stomach. Their quest continued, but things got weirder when they kept running into different brown bears, each one greedier than the last, as if the forest ran a buffet for gluttons only. Meanwhile, on the other side of the wilderness, Suzu and her knockoff Animal Planet squad bumped into none other than An. She strutted in like she owned the woods and tried to take on Suzu, bouncing around like a cracked-out idiot. One of the creatures with Suzu wasn't having it, though, and promptly slammed her into a tree before peaceably continuing their search like nothing happened. Back with Yukino's squad, Ikuto pulled out a sketch of Kuma and started asking random animals if they'd seen the culprit. Most of them just beat him up for wasting their time. Eventually, one creature actually gave them directions without violence, and while following them, they ended up in front of a sketchy-looking wooden bridge. Ikuto was understandably hesitant, but his peanut-brained partner leapt off his shoulder and scampered across the death trap without thinking twice. However, as she ran across the bridge, it suddenly snapped midway, and the genius fell like her common sense. Luckily, Ikuto dove and caught her just in time, clinging to the edge. But fate wasn't done with them. The rest of the bridge gave way, but Kuma saved them by swinging the bridge, sending them crashing into the forest floor. They were surprised when they saw Kuma there, and Yukino discovered that Kuma had been searching for her too, thinking she was the one who'd gone missing. A few days later, our boy Ikuto decided to pick up a stick and start swinging it around in his personal kendo class. When Suzu asked him why he suddenly thought he was Samurai Jack, he said it was a man's duty to protect women. Unfortunately for him, Suzu looked at him like he was speaking Greek, because where she's from, women don't need protection. Anyway, they went to carry some cargo, and Ikuto figured it was the perfect time to prove he had that alpha male strength. But the weakling barely lifted one load, while Suzu casually hauled 3 like they were grocery bags. Before the poor guy could recover from the humiliation, the ground suddenly started rumbling. Turns out, it was an earthquake, and Suzu immediately switched from strong woman mode to scared girl mode and grabbed the confused giraffe who was still trying to process the situation like your old Windows XP on 1 gig RAM. Later on, Suzu went to take a bath, but surprisingly the tub was as dry as your DM. The island's hot spring had dried up since the pipe had broken earlier. So, the girls did what girls do. They filled a barrel with water, lit a fire underneath, and turned it into a discount sauna. After washing off their misery, they gathered to discuss their collective crisis, because how on earth were they supposed to survive a few days without bathing? That's when Ikuto decided to contribute some big brain energy by telling them daily baths weren't necessary and that a wet towel could do the job. The girls looked at him like he was the reason global warming existed and kindly reminded him that this exact mindset was why no girl wanted him back in the city. That night, Ikuto had a life-changing idea, thinking that if he fixed the island's busted plumbing system, the girls would finally stop roasting him. So, at the crack of dawn, he dashed off to do the hot spring, and the girls, probably worried he'd break something else, followed him. Together, they discovered that the spring was clogged. Like any logical solution, Ikuto and Suzu jumped into the suspiciously deep spring well to clear it up manually. Just as they were getting their hands dirty, Mother Nature triggered another quake. The whole place collapsed, and they got swallowed deeper into the underground spring. While trying to find an exit, Ikuto noticed some wind blowing from a crevice and figured that was their escape route. But it was way too high to climb. That's when his brain sparked again. He decided to punch the spring's source, hoping the water pressure would eat them back to the surface. Oh, and just to add some spice, a creepy red-eyed water demon decided to make a guest appearance in the cave, but our lovebirds were too focused on surviving to notice. Eventually, all of Ikuto's punches paid off. The water exploded like a geyser and launched them out of the hole like wet noodles, conveniently helping them escape the aquatic demon of doom. Once back on land and somehow still alive, the whole village rejoiced that their water woes were over. Suzu, in her usual confused but sincere way, thanked Ikuto for being a man, even though she still had no clue what that meant. After a couple of days of doing absolutely nothing productive, Suzu dragged Ikuto to the southern forest to meet her so-called legendary master, who also happened to be the Lord of the East. On the way, she kept hyping the guy up like he was some ancient martial arts god, but Ikuto's dreams were crushed the moment he laid eyes on the so-called master, who turned out to be a chubby two-tailed cat with serious personality issues. The furball master didn't waste time before inviting them to join the annual survival game, an event where the dog tribe and the cat tribe basically throw hands to decide who gets to wear the crown of the lord. Ikuto was about to say something smart, but Suzu seemed pumped, so he kept his complaints in his throat. The next day, it was game time, and the two tribes roared into battle. While charging ahead with Suzu, they slipped on the most disrespectful banana peel in existence and face planted into the ground like a pro. Before he could recover his dignity, an overexcited puppy with more bark than brains jumped them. But Ikuto smacked a banana peel on his face, knocking him to the ground. Not long after, they spotted the dog leader chilling, and as they approached, he dropped the cliché line that it was impossible for the cats to win. That was all it took for Ikuto's ego to hit overdrive, as he immediately dashed in like he was possessed by anime rage. But before things got spicy, Ayan and Machai appeared out of nowhere, flexing their loyalty to the dog tribe. Instead of an all-out deathmatch, they ended up doing what looked more like a friendly sparring session, and the fight eventually ended in the dog tribe winning. They started popping imaginary champagne. But before the ego trip could take full flight, Suzu's tiny cat master yeeted himself into the dog leader and took him down, flipping the results in Cat's favor instead. The next morning, Ikuto woke up to find Machai sitting on him. She said they were going to check out some fancy pink tree called the Sakura, and he didn't even get a say in the matter. Before long, the whole crew set off, looking like a low-budget school trip, just before reaching the northern forest, which was basically ruled by the Lord of Mood Swings. They split into groups and took different paths to avoid triggering his inner demon. After somehow surviving the North's forest drama, they regrouped, only to find out that the so-called scary lord had been standing there waiting. But they were surprised when they discovered that he wasn't scary at all, unlike they thought. The guy was actually chill and told them he was no longer the boss since he got whooped a few days ago. So now he was just a jobless dude giving directions. He pointed them to the route leading to the cherry blossoms, and Ikuto wondered why they had to go through all this anime filler arc nonsense just to see some tree. But before he could grumble more, Suzu grabbed his hand and pulled him toward the glowing light ahead. When they finally arrived, Ikuto saw the Sakura tree in full bloom, and his brain short-circuited from how stunning it looked. He mentally took back every stupid thing he said earlier and just stood there, humbled by the pink, sparkly nature magic in front of him. Following this, after binge reading some suspiciously detailed books about guys and their odd behaviors, Chickage decided it was time for a little experiment, so she invited the gang over to her mansion. Hiding upstairs like a giddy villainess, she peeped from the shadows, excited to finally analyze Ikuto in the wild. A few minutes later, after everyone had settled in, Chickage casually appeared, wearing something freaky, and Ikuto, the certified cultured simp, started bleeding from his nose because his brain couldn't handle the sight of the huge melons she had on display. Luckily, she changed into something less likely to cause cardiac arrest, so his sausage could be soft. When Ikuto asked what kind of fever dream made her wear that nonsense, she told him she'd read in one of her sketchy books that guys liked visual stimulation. She just didn't expect him to malfunction this fast after seeing her. Ikuto, confused, asked where she even got such cursed literature from, and she said the sea sometimes coughed up weird stuff. She later dragged them to her little collection room, which was basically a storage area of questionable human inventions, and asked Ikuto to play tech support. But he told her all the fancy toys were useless because they needed electricity, which they obviously didn't have on their Lost in Time island. As they got ready to leave to cook dinner like normal humans, Chickage pulled her Uno reverse card and begged them to stay over. She promised VIP treatment and even offered Suzu some rice cakes, which immediately made her agree. When dinner finally arrived, Chickage served them a masterclass in how not to cook. One by one, she brought in dishes so suspicious they could have been banned by health authorities, and Ikuto ate in fear of turning into a zombie. Later, the girls went to take a bath, and when they were done, Ikuto followed suit. However, what he didn't know was that Chickage had stayed behind to spy on him mid-shower. She jumped into the bath when he was not looking and got an underwater, uncensored view of his tool, which made her embarrassed. While she wished she could hawk Tua with it, Pinako, Chickage's mutant elephant, decided to cannonball into the bath and landed right on her, instantly busting her secret operation. Later that night, Suzu turned cold and refused to talk to Ikuto because she was jealous that he let Chickage in the bath, but wouldn't let her. He immediately explained that he didn't know she was in. But Suzu stood on the fact that Pinako was there too. He got confused because Pinako was an elephant, but she told him that it was a female anyway, and said she wouldn't forgive him until he allowed her to bathe with him too. One fine morning, while Rin was in the river washing away her sins, Ikuto casually walked in, shocking her. She screamed immediately and blasted him with a kick straight from the land of embarrassment. However, he couldn't help but be impressed, as this was the first girl on the island who wasn't a walking OnlyFans ad. Unlike everyone else on the island had been willing to bathe with him and give him their milk for free, Rin had the decency to kick him instead. However, he got another one just for standing there and looking impressed. Later on, she approached him to apologize for going Mortal Kombat on him earlier, and he told her he was chill about it, but Loki wished she could be that aggressive with him in private too. On their way back home, she casually asked him to help out at her workplace the next day. He agreed like a true simp in denial, but before the boy could fantasize too hard, her sister Mikoto popped up out of nowhere to give him the good "all stay away from my sister or I'll end you" warning. That night, Suzu noticed a shiny bump on Akuto's head and asked him what in the world had happened to him. However, he dodged the question but eventually mentioned he'd be helping Rin the next day. Hearing this, Suzu asked to tag along too. The next day, they rolled up to Rin's workplace, and the moment they arrived, Rin's mom wasted no time in teasing Rin, telling her to make sure she didn't only hammer nails today but also get hammered by Akuto. As work began, Rin and Akuto got paired together, and they actually worked pretty well until Mikoto saw them and decided jealousy was a valid personality trait. She turned to Suzu and started ranting about how Akuto might catch feelings for Rin. But Suzu just blinked in cluelessness, as she was too single to decode what feelings even meant. Mikoto went on to explain that Akuto had taken a flying boot to the head the day before during his peeping incident, which made Suzu suddenly connect the dots, so that's where the bump came from. Meanwhile, construction kept moving, but every time Mikoto saw her sister getting too cozy with Akuto, she made sure she interrupted them, almost sending him to the grave each time. Meanwhile, Suzu also started getting jealous seeing Akuto and Rin acting too friendly. Eventually, Rin stepped out for a bit, and while she was away, Mikoto, still salty, challenged Akuto to a duel. My guy tried to politely decline, but the moment she dropped the forbidden word, impossible, he got triggered. The two instantly unlocked their carpentry innate ability and went full DIY monsters, speed running the construction project just to outdo each other. Everyone seeing them was shocked and wondered what cheap crack they were high on. That night, Rin sat there quietly at dinner, feeling like a background character in her own love story, because she didn't get the chance to riz Akuto with her construction skills as she had planned. Meanwhile, Rin's mom kept joking about Akuto marrying her daughter, but this only made Mikoto's jealous rage meter hit the roof again. A few days later, the heavens decided to cry a river, and it rained so hard that everyone had to lock themselves indoors like prisoners on house arrest. Akuto casually told Suzu that in his own world, they didn't cancel life just because water fell from the sky. But apparently, on this island, a few drops meant mandatory Netflix and nap day. After a few hours of staring at the wall like a depressed idiot, Akuto started losing his mind. He let out a scream, ranting about how he'd be training with his grandpa if he were in his world and wasn't stuck on this god-forsaken island. Not wanting to die of boredom, they decided to play shogi like two adults with no plans for the future. As they played, Suzu suddenly activated her Inmo mode and spaced out like an outdated computer loading screen. Akuto, confused, started wondering if she was going through some kind of sad girl era recently. Turns out, she was reminiscing about playing shogi with her mom whenever it rained back in the day. Except now her mom had gone off to the big sky, or perhaps to hell below. Meanwhile, Machai and Ekane got into their rivalry thing again and began chasing each other around like Tom and Jerry. While at it, they found a strawberry fruit close by and decided to pluck it. At the same time, while Yukino races with her pets, she found a flower and thought it might be a great present for Suzu. They soon met together and wondered where Chika was since they all planned to meet Suzu, only to find her barely hanging on for her life in the flooded river. Back at Suzu's home, she went to make lunch for herself and Akuto, and while at it, Akuto just watched her and pitied that she was always alone at home during rainy days because her mother was no more. He got so lost in thought that he didn't realize that she was already in his face. Plot tension arose between them. But before Akuto could release the tension down below, the rest of the girls conveniently showed up and presented their gifts they found on their way, claiming it was all a coincidence. But Akuto wasn't buying that cheap lie, as he knew these women were all here to lift Suzu's mood on a special day like this. A few moments later, they all decided to take their bath and suddenly stripped their clothes, instantly giving Akuto a brain glitch at the sight of various balloon sizes bouncing before him, which made him think that he was really going to die of loss of blood if things continued this way. After the chaos ended and the girls finally dispersed, Akuto stayed back to have a heart-to-heart with Suzu. She opened up about her mom's little fairy tale speech, something about finding the man of her dreams and rocking a wedding gown like a Disney princess. As she softly sang the song her mom used to hum, Akuto started imagining the two of them getting hitched. But before his delusion could reach honeymoon level, Suzu called his name and yanked him back to reality. The following week, Akuto woke up in the middle of the night only to find Suzu sleeping in a water tank. She was having a pleasurable dream of bathing with Akuto. Seeing her, Akuto quickly tried to wake her, but she didn't wake up because she was deep in a dream where he was deep inside her. So he pulled her out of the water, but immediately lost a pint of blood when he saw her full plot through her transparent shirt. By morning, the girl had cooked herself a fever, and the grandma diagnosed her, saying they needed ice to cool her down. Akuto, confused as ever, wondered where on earth he was supposed to find ice on an island with zero electricity and the nearest fridge in another dimension. But Granny hit him with a nature will provide speech, and he reluctantly hit the road. He trekked his way through the jungle and eventually stumbled upon Yukino and her menace of a mother. He explained the ice emergency, but the ogre of a mom had already gone and turned all the ice into ice cream along with the gluttonous bear, Kuma. Yukino, after trash-talking her mom, informed Akuto that there was somewhere else to fetch the ice from. They would have to climb to the top of Mount Fuji. The girls joined him on this frosty expedition, and after grabbing some snow chunks, the weather decided to level up like a final boss. The girls suggested they camp it out till the blizzard chilled, but Akuto refused to listen because he wanted to return to Suzu fast. He started pulling the cart alone, and when he began to get tired due to the storm and heaviness of the cart, he remembered the pain Suzu was going through and reasoned that he was still having it easy compared to her. So he bolted down the mountain with all his strength. However, he soon saw a warning sign ahead, but because he was at full throttle, he fell off the mountain before he could stop himself. Meanwhile, the girls thought they needed to help, even though they were not aware that he had fallen off. As they ran in his direction, the storm suddenly got heavier and washed them away. Akuto was not giving up anyway, but as he tried climbing back up, the girls clashed with him, and they all went flying off the cliff. The girls got tossed together into one massive snowball and crash-landed in the forest. Akuto quickly grabbed a handful of snow and made a mad dash for home. Just as he was dragging himself through the woods, Yukino's bird came out of nowhere and gave him a surprise Uber ride straight to the doorstep. By the time he got home, the snow had almost evaporated into thin air, barely leaving just a puddle. However, he was shocked when he realized that Suzu was already up and shining as though her fever was just a prank. Before he could even process anything, Akuto collapsed and developed a fever too, so the precious ice he fetched was used to treat him instead. Some days later, Machai sat across from her sister at the table, happily munching away, only for Ayan to drop a bombshell mid-bite, saying no Sigma male would ever wife her up because she couldn't even boil water without burning down the kitchen. That comment hit Machai hard, so she decided she'd prove everyone wrong and become the next master chef. She then headed to Chikich's mansion to beg her to train her. Too bad Chikich turned out to be one of those Gen Z babes who wouldn't even recognize a frying pan. After wasting Machai's time with random life advice, she eventually gave up and stormed off to find someone who actually touches fire, Rin. Rin welcomed her and put her to work. Except instead of cooking, Machai spent hours sanding wood and making fancy little boxes. She strutted home with her new handmade treasure, but when Ayan saw it, she wondered what type of idiot she was before reminding her that the goal was to cook, not launch a career in furniture design. Machai yeeted herself back to Rin and demanded actual cooking lessons this time. Rin gave in, and Cooking 101 finally began with Machai trying her best to follow every step like her future marriage depended on it. Meanwhile, Suzu, An, and Akuto were chilling and gossiping about Machai's sudden transformation when out of nowhere, an arrow came flying past and nearly took Akuto's head off. Turns out, Machai had attached a note to it inviting them over for a taste of her culinary masterpiece. Curious, they decided to go, hoping it wouldn't be that bad since she had been training. Well, on their way there, they ran into Rin, limping, pale, and clutching a walking stick while looking like she'd seen the devil himself. When they asked what happened, she warned them not to eat whatever Machai was cooking. Akuto and Suzu immediately tried to back out, but before they could escape, Machai's weird magical zoo crew popped up and dragged them to her house like it was a horror movie. Now trapped, they sat in silence as Machai entered the kitchen and slammed the door shut behind her, warning them not to peek unless they wanted to lose their eyes. Moments later, they heard disturbing slicing sounds coming from inside, and they started wondering if this was the end because Machai wasn't known to be mentally stable after all. Eventually, she waltzed out holding what could only be described as a deep sea monster on a plate and told them to dig in like it was Thanksgiving dinner. No one moved until Akuto volunteered to try it first. He reluctantly took a bite, mentally reciting the Lord's Prayer, but he became shocked when it turned out to be very delicious. Everyone else followed, bracing for food poisoning, but ended up loving it too, even though the dish looked like it had been fished out of a haunted swamp. Seeing them devour her food with tears of confused happiness, Machai lit up like a proud gremlin and skipped back into the kitchen to bring out even scarier dishes, leaving them regretting ever knowing her. A couple of weeks later, Suzu had the bright idea to throw a birthday party for her little pet, Tonkatsu. She tried molding tofu to look like the creature, and while at it, Akuto popped up, looking confused as usual, and asked what the heck she was doing. She proudly declared it was Tonkatsu's birthday, and she wanted it to be special. The moment she mentioned the birthday, Akuto's brain short-circuited, and his face dropped like he just remembered he used to be a fan of Diddy. Suzu, clearly blind to social cues, kept wondering why he suddenly looked like someone had just stepped on his soul. They both failed spectacularly at sculpting the tofu, and An soon appeared, ready to reignite their weekly civil war. While the girls were busy roasting each other's existence, Akuto quietly Houdini'd out of the room. Suzu noticed the ghosting a little too late and stumbled upon a picture of him and some random chick from his world. Of course, An jumped to conclusions and claimed it had to be his lover. They later found Akuto just standing there by the seashore, gazing at the ocean like he was in a low-budget music video. So naturally, the girls assumed he was drowning in heartbreak. When they ran to the island's wise grandma for tea and gossip, the old woman explained that homesickness was probably eating the poor guy alive, not love. Later that day, Suzu continued attempting to make the tofu art, and the rest of the local thirst squad showed up looking for Akuto, wanting to take advantage of his vulnerability. But he was nowhere to be found. That's when Suzu realized that the picture had disappeared from the book, and she immediately thought Akuto had officially had enough of the island drama and was sailing off back to his world. She dashed to the shore and found him looking at the sea, preparing to set sail. Suzu started to shout his name to stop him, and she quickly dashed toward, but before she could get to him, he was already in the midst of the sea, facing the dangerous whirlpools. Knowing that he was on a mission to unalive himself, she immediately brought out a plant and turned it into a cord before going full Scorpion from Mortal Kombat with a "get over here" move that dragged Akuto's confused soul back to land. Turns out, he wasn't running away after all. He was just trying to send a message in a bottle because it was also his sister's birthday. After clearing the air, Akuto helped ruin the tofu with Suzu, and the Great Tonkatsu birthday bash kicked off. That night, Suzu and Akuto sat together under the stars, having a mini therapy session. He talked about promising to take his sister shopping and wanting to apologize since he couldn't make it. However, the problem was that every time he chucked the bottle toward home, the sea threw it back. Meanwhile, Suzu told him to try one more time, and he summoned his shattered hope together to do so. Luckily, this time, the bottle finally made it through, exciting both of them so much that they almost kissed. But bro chickened out and just held her hand. A week later, the village started experiencing a weird wave of food disappearances. One fine morning, Akuto and the girls gathered for a meeting to discuss the ongoing food heist. But just as they were speculating who the mysterious thief could be, Machai appeared casually, with suspicious crumbs decorating her lips. The squad instantly switched into detective mode. eyeballing her like they had just found the culprit. They began to stalk and catch her eating what didn't belong to her around the town, and decided to confront her about it. She confessed that although she just did all this, she had no clue about the other village-wide raids. Not satisfied with her half-baked confession, the girls decided to form a knockoff DSS investigation unit with the mission to uncover the identity of the mysterious Midnight Glutton. Machai also joined them to vindicate herself by proving that she wasn't responsible. After asking nosy questions around, they cracked the thief's snacking pattern and guessed the next 2 places he might hit. So, they split up into mini-teams and headed to their assigned crime scenes. On their way, Suzu and Akuto stumbled upon a cucumber farm that had been absolutely violated. Later that night, they hid in the house, but something felt fishy as Akuto started overthinking, wondering why the burglar hit up the cucumber farm after raiding the shrine, since the mystery glutton had only been hitting one place per day. Meanwhile, a few moments later, Ayan and her team suddenly saw the thief trying to steal again. Ayan, however, managed to catch him with a rope while he tried to escape, and just when they thought they had solved the case, the dude somehow got away, though leaving only his mask behind. Meanwhile, Akuto's team could not guard a place for their lives, as they were all fast asleep. Akuto suddenly woke up and realized they had failed their side of the mission terribly. But as he started blaming himself, he noticed movement, and it turned out the bandit was already inside, throwing a private feast. Before Akuto could even sneeze, the thief had disappeared. The next morning, Akuto and Suzu returned to their house, only to find that it had been raided too while they were away. However, Akuto noticed someone was inside and immediately went in to check, only to find a strange girl bathing in their bathroom. Seeing she had no clothes on, Bro's brain immediately overloaded. She later introduced herself as Mei Mei and claimed she was part of a traveling circus before getting washed up on the island by some thunderstorm. Just like Akuto, she confessed to stealing food, but only because she was shy and didn't know how to ask for help. Akuto and Suzu, trying to hold back their inner judgment, told her that eating a whole cucumber farm was going too far and was worthy of juvenile time. But plot twist, she denied it, and she said the cucumber carnage was probably the work of her friend, who also got washed ashore along with her. Now convinced they were dealing with a circus full of kleptomaniacs, they set out to find this mysterious partner. Along the way, they spotted Machai approaching. Mei Mei freaked out and ran for cover, because if Machai caught her, she was going to turn into shredded cabbage. Luckily, Yukino's dog followed the smell trail from the abandoned mask and led them to an animal. Mei Mei immediately went to hug him, shocking Akuto and Suzu, as it turned out that Mei Mei's supposed partner was not a human but an animal. Machai, on the other hand, got angry because her friends had been side-eyeing her all week because of these 2 clowns. However, as she prepared to release her fury, Akuto stopped her and told her to forgive the poor girl since she had already apologized. After that whole mess, Mei Mei and her green water demon named Kappa started living on the island, but she failed at blending with everyone because her social skills were on life support, and every time she tried talking to anyone, she had to go full undercover mode just to say hi. Sometime later, Suzu and Akuto gave her a cozy new place to crash with her swamp buddy, and Mei Mei thought it'd be a genius idea to go shopping for some home essentials by herself. Suzu and Akuto, clearly knowing she's a walking panic attack, offered to help, but she hit them with the classic "I got this," only to immediately freeze after taking 2 steps. So the 2 human babysitters followed her as she awkwardly tried to meet Rin. But the second Mei Mei laid eyes on her, her brain went offline, and she dove headfirst into a random drum like it was her safe space. She started feeling like the biggest loser in anime history for being scared of people. Later, Ayan pulled up, and Mei Mei, mistaking her for Machai, who was ready to beat her up the other day for stealing, went full hide and seek again. However, Ayan didn't come to throw hands. Instead, she dropped a cheap motivational quote and told Mei Mei to love herself instead of trying to uninstall her shy personality software. This made Suzu and Akuto stare at her like she just solved world hunger, because it was the first time she ever said anything that wasn't 98% nonsense. Then came Kappa, but the moment Ayan saw him, she screamed and took off, leaving Akuto confused. Suzu then casually explained that Ayan was suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder because she once got smacked around by a different Kappa back in the day. Hearing that, Kappa's pea-sized brain lit up, and he thought maybe she knew his cousins or something. So he took off chasing her immediately. An, in full panic mode, almost took a flying leap off a cliff trying to escape. But before she could become a tragic anime flashback, Mei Mei pulled a superhero move and tackled her face into the ground. Later on, they all regrouped with the rest of the girls, and for the first time ever, Mei Mei started feeling like she belonged as everyone tried to make her feel at home. So she got on her knees and started hitting the ground with her face in appreciation. A few days later, Suzu's master popped up uninvited, and she was visibly shocked that he came. The old dude said he came bearing an urgent message for the Lord of the West, only to realize he was nowhere to be found. Ikuto asked what the drama was about, and the master dropped the bomb that some random dude was going around folding regional lords like laundry. He had already packed up the lords of the East and North, and now, rumor had it he was chilling somewhere in the West. Also, the Lord of the East was on his way to get revenge on the mysterious dude who benched him from his throne, since it was widely known that anyone who defeated the Lord of a region became the new Lord of that region. Suzu's master then gave them the full description of this mystery man, and Ikuto's face changed like someone who just realized their crush was into women. The person he described sounded exactly like Kappa. Meanwhile, on the other side of the village, the Lord of the East rolled up and boldly challenged Kappa to a duel. But the moment his eyes landed on the prettiest girl he'd ever seen since birth, Mei Mei, he dropped the whole duel idea and grabbed her like she was his last meal, saying he would take her instead. Ikuto, Suzu, and the old man pulled up just in time to see the East Lord holding Mei Mei hostage. The angry little cat threatened him to drop the girl, but the furball wasn't scary enough, and the Lord dashed immediately. The squad chased after him, but out of nowhere, this dog popped out and body checked the bear. It was the ex-Lord of the North. Mr. Tiger announced he had come to take the warrior who defeated him back to the northern forest to become the next lord. Everyone blinked twice when they realized he was talking about Mei Mei, wondering if it was the same Mei Mei who could barely speak 2 words without melting into the floor from embarrassment. Turns out, during their last encounter, Mei Mei had accidentally flung a rock at his head while running from him due to her shyness, but the tiger mistook this for her smart fighting strategy, even though it was a total coincidence. While everyone was still trying to process how a shy bean like Mei Mei bagged a regional win, the Lord of the East had already escaped again. They all took off after him, and just when he thought he was safe, the tiger came back and floored him for the second time. He then snatched Mei Mei and refused to give her back, saying she had to rule the northern forest. Ikuto wasn't about to let that slide and stepped in like a broke hero with nothing to lose. Tiger Dude challenged him to a one-on-one for the girl. The winner gets the princess. They squared up immediately, but Ikuto already knew he was about to catch the beating of his life. Following that, the tiger mopped the floor with him, but Ikuto held on with the shaky technique Grandpa once taught him. But it didn't do jack, and the boy just kept getting rocked like a cheap piñata. Meanwhile, an unknown entity was watching and enjoying the fight far away. When the beating got unbearable, he passed by like a ninja and whispered the cheat code to Ikuto, telling him to hit him between the tails. Ikuto didn't waste time. He aimed and smacked the tiger in the tail region, immediately disarming him. Seeing this, the tiger just took his loss like an honor and walked away silently. He soon bumped into the Lord of the West, who casually admitted he was the one who told Ikuto the tiger's weak spot. Apparently, he had figured that the tiger was just trying to train the poor boy, but the tiger denied that he didn't know what he was talking about. Back at the scene, Mei Mei gently took Ikuto's hand and thanked him for defending her. And right there, Suzu stood to the side with a weird expression that showed she was jealous. A couple of weeks rolled by, and one night, Chickage stumbled across a suspiciously dusty book tucked away in the dark corners of her library. Instead of minding her business like a normal person, she decided to read from it, and a wild spell later, lightning rained down on every house on the island. The next morning, Suzu and Ikuto woke up feeling weird. They looked in the mirror and realized they now had tails and furry ears. Stepping outside to get answers, they were met with even more disturbing sights, as the whole village had turned into some twisted human-animal cosplay convention. And everyone was walking around like this was just another Tuesday. They soon met Chickage, and were surprised that she was oddly perfectly normal. She casually told them she was behind the chaos, but they thought she was talking out of her behind until she waved her hands around and did some rip-off Hogwarts stuff. Ikuto's brain short-circuited because all this mess clashed with his loyal love for science, just when An showed up, ready to dropkick Chickage into next week. The witch hopped on a broomstick and flew off, shocking Ikuto, who began to rethink his entire life choices because this had defied all the laws of science he knew. After regaining some brain cells, the group stormed the library to find something useful for once. They fished out a sketchy book labeled Seal, and to nobody's shock anymore, it opened on its own and spat out a genie. The sparkly dude granted them 7 wishes like it was Black Friday, and the girls immediately wasted 4 of them on nonsense. Meanwhile, Ikuto just watched in confusion, not believing his eyes. With only 3 wishes left, they finally had a eureka moment and reasoned they needed to catch Chickage. So, they made the wish, and an umbrella fell from the sky while Chickage just waltzed over to get trapped like a fly in a soda bottle. They tied her up and gave her the roast of her life, but they forgot Jennies don't come with loyalty. The moment the genie informed them they had 2 wishes left, Chickage took the opportunity and made her own wish, asking it to release her, shocking everyone. Now down to just 1 wish. Everyone turned into wild monkeys trying to snatch the final say. Ikuto just stood there wondering if he should finally test the waters or keep being Mr. Science is Real. But before he could blink, Machai strolled in and asked the genie for a cup of tea. The genie granted it instantly, and just like that, the genie vanished. Chickage laughed and then cast a spell that boxed everyone up like Amazon packages. She then came up with the genius idea to cut them open like a stage magician to see if those tricks were real or just edited for TV. And her first test subject was none other than Ikuto, who blanked out immediately from fear. But before she could complete her evil experiment, her pet, who had also somehow turned into a human, barged in, absolutely pissed. In full rage, the pet picked up a rock and bonked her on the head, instantly causing all the magic on the island to shatter. Ikuto stayed knocked out longer than necessary, but when he finally woke up, everything was back to normal. People were human again, tails were gone, and the chaos reversed. But instead of thanking the anime gods for not leaving them as zoo exhibits, the idiot just yawned and shrugged everything off as a weird dream. After that, Suzu and Ikuto got a letter from Makoto saying that one of her sisters was about to jump into the dating pool, and Ikuto was the unlucky contestant on her blind date bingo card. So, the two headed out the next day, but ended up bumping into Shinobu, one of Makoto's sisters, who was lying on the ground exhausted. Turns out Shorty hadn't eaten in forever, so they took her home and stuffed her with food. Midway through chomping down, Shinobu suddenly realized that Ikuto was the sword-swinging demon she'd been hearing about from her master and other clout-chasing lords. So, she immediately challenged him to a deathmatch right there. But Ikuto, being the gentleman, politely declined because he didn't want to slice up a cute girl for no reason. Unfortunately, Shinobu was relentless. She kept pestering him day and night. And to make things spicier, Suzu caught them in a questionable position that looked like they were filming a collab for OnlyFans. Fed up and angry, Suzu told Ikuto to accept the challenge so she could leave him alone. And so Ikuto reluctantly agreed. Next day, the battle began and Shinobu came at him with more moves than a TikTok dancer. But Ikuto dodged every single one like he was possessed by the spirit of Bruce Lee. Unfortunately, both of them had worse attack stats than a level 1 RPG character, so nobody was actually landing anything. Then, Shinobu activated her ultimate move. She split into 7 clones like a low-budget Naruto, and launched a full-on spam attack. But Ikuto still dodged them all like he had Ultra Instinct. When she finally charged in close, Ikuto, seeing an opening, reached out and gave her balloons a quick squeeze, making Shinobu freeze. Ikuto immediately started apologizing like the simp he was, but instead of decking him, Shinobu just blushed and asked him what kind of technique that was because it almost sent her to Pleasure Land. He then replied that he could only teach her in private, and this time she might even scream. The duel was over, and Ikuto was declared the winner. Shinobu then shook his hand and left like a defeated villain who secretly enjoyed losing. A few weeks later, Ikuto randomly picked up a horror novel. Curious to read more, he paid Chickage a visit to borrow the next volume from her haunted library of doom. Meanwhile, back at the crib, Suzu received a shady-looking invitation letter. The next day, Suzu, Ikuto, and Mei decided to follow the mysterious invite to some random house in the middle of nowhere, as if none of them had ever watched a horror flick before. Upon arrival, they were greeted by a suspiciously cheerful AI robot named Sakuya. Later, Ikuto, being the nosy legend he was, tried talking to the bot and casually brought up the creepy letters. But plot twist, Sakuya claimed she also received letters from them, saying they were coming. leaving Ikuto wondering what the heck was going on here. Just then, Chikage appeared from the shadows and took a peek at the letters. The moment she spotted a crimson symbol on them, she calmly announced that the symbol belonged to Beniyasha, a psycho villain from the horror novels Ikuto had been reading. According to her, those so-called novels weren't fiction at all. They were real-life documentaries of Beniyasha's horror rampage from 18 years ago that had the entire village shaking in terror. But then the dude suddenly disappeared like your crush after you said hi. Still, Chikage tried to brush it off as some twisted TikTok prank, but Sakuya declared that even if the story was real, she'd protect them by all means. Later that evening, Ikuto decided it was bath o'clock since the girls had already taken theirs. But just when he got in, the man realized he forgot his towel and turned back to get it. Anne, who majored in stalking and red flags, figured it was her moment to shine and sneaked after him, thinking she'd get her accidental steamy plot moment. But thanks to zero situational awareness, she didn't know Ikuto had turned back. So she jumped into the bath like a cultured moron and hugged what she thought was Ikuto, only for the man to turn around and it wasn't Ikuto. She discovered it was a masked scary weirdo, and she screamed before passing out. Hearing the scream, Ikuto and Sakuya rushed in and found her knocked out. When she regained consciousness and saw Ikuto, she hit him for scaring her, even though the poor guy didn't even know what had happened. Suddenly, Anne began scratching herself vigorously, and that's when the final boss appeared. A mysterious dude with the confidence of a man who's never used deodorant appeared and casually announced that this was the effect of the island's strongest itching lotion. He then introduced himself as Beniyasha. Ikuto asked the creep what his deal was, and this clown casually replied that he just enjoyed watching girls scream in terror. He proudly announced he had started with Anne and wasn't stopping until every last girl had tasted chaos. He then added that the itching would last a whole week unless the antidote was applied. Beniyasha then bolted off with Ikuto and Sakuya chasing after him, but he managed to escape. Meanwhile, the girls, completely oblivious to the madness outside, were busy planning how to make Ikuto clap one of them that night. Each one picked a room and waited for the chosen one moment. Sadly, their romantic fantasies were about to get ruined because Beniyasha decided it was time for jump scares. One by one, he crept in and either froze them or turned them into walking crackheads. Then came Suzu's turn. Beniyasha, dressed like Ikuto, got into her room, and Suzu, thinking she won the Ikuto lottery, got all excited, only for the real Ikuto to pull up, and she realized she would have been clapped for free. Ikuto began to chase Beniyasha, and they both ended up on the rooftop. That's when Ikuto remembered he was terrified of height, but just as he was about to have a mental breakdown, Beniyasha dropped the forbidden word, impossible. That alone triggered Ikuto's rage mode. He leapt at him like a rabid animal, but Beniyasha, being the slippery clown he was, tossed the antidotes into the air. Ikuto, instead of thinking like a human being, jumped after them and crashed into the ground before Sakuya could save him. Beniyasha then transformed into a kite. He fluttered away into the sky while Ikuto lay there, hating his existence for being useless. However, the truth is the real Beniyasha hadn't even left the building. Turns out, Chikage was behind the entire circus, scheming with her mother, the actual Beniyasha. Her mom was also moonlighting as the mysterious author who had been turning all these wild events into novels for people to read. 2 weeks later, Machai accidentally knocked over a statue, unknowingly breaking the seal on a mischievous tanuki demon that had been trapped for 1,000 years. This creature possessed the power to shape-shift into virtually anything, using this ability to cause chaos throughout the city. However, it had one flaw. Its belly always stuck out awkwardly, making its disguises imperfect. Determined to trap it again, Machai chased the demon tirelessly, though it kept slipping away thanks to its deceptive transformations. Ikuto and Suzu eventually joined the hunt, but the trickster managed to outwit all of them, much to Machai's frustration. After spending the entire day in a wild goose chase, the group collapsed in exhaustion. Ikuto voiced his annoyance, saying the creature had played them for fools all day. Suzu was taken aback by his words, since he normally dismissed anything supernatural. Wanting to test him, she casually claimed that catching a tanuki was impossible. To her surprise, Ikuto readily agreed. Seizing the moment, Suzu grabbed him and declared she had caught the shape-shifter. They exposed its telltale belly and quickly tied the creature up, securing it along with Ayan to prevent another escape. Machai was stunned that Suzu had seen through the disguise when she hadn't. Her jealousy over Suzu's connection with Ikuto began to bubble. In the end, Machai resealed the revolting demon, sending it back to whatever underworld it had crawled out of. Shortly afterward, they found the real Ikuto unconscious nearby. When he finally woke up, he assumed everything that had happened was just a weird dream, still refusing to believe that demons were real. The following day, Yukino wandered through the forest and stumbled upon a vibrant blue feather. She pondered whether it could belong to the mythical blue bird. Meanwhile, the next morning, Ikuto continued his training. Suzu complimented how much he'd improved, and Ikuto shared that he aimed to confront someone from his past once he returned home. Before the conversation could go further, Suzu abruptly ran off. Ikuto then quietly noted that maybe it was time for him to head back. By the riverside, Suzu admitted she didn't want him to leave. Shortly after, she ran into Yukino, who eagerly presented the blue feather. Believing it was evidence of the legendary bird's existence, Yukino suggested they search for the creature together. Suzu hesitated, saying she needed to gather firewood. But Yukino's bear had other ideas and spirited her away. Back at Suzu's home, the ever-chatty chicken explained to Ikuto that whoever found the blue bird would be granted incredible luck. Ikuto remained doubtful and opted to fetch water instead. Elsewhere, the girls, joined by their animal companions, continued their search. Before long, they spotted an unusual bird and gave chase, only to tumble into a deep crevice. Ikuto returned to find the house empty and grew concerned. Determined to find Suzu, he set off into the forest. Tonkatsu managed to pick up her scent and guided the way. Despite the downpour that followed, Ikuto pressed on, driven by worry. Out of nowhere, the legendary blue bird appeared. Though Ikuto didn't believe in such nonsense, desperation led him to follow its path. Eventually, he heard Suzu's voice echoing from the crevice. As he located the girls, the blue bird suddenly transformed into the odd creature they'd seen earlier, its true identity cleverly hidden. With everyone working together, they managed to rescue Suzu and Yukino. Rin later constructed a fence around the spot to prevent future mishaps. After the ordeal, Ikuto and Suzu made their way home. In his heart, Ikuto resolved to grow stronger not just for himself, but to protect Suzu as well. About a week later, the lively village buzzed with activity as Suzu went around handing out vegetables. However, she got everything wrong because she had a peanut brain like you. Ikuto stepped in gently, helping her correct her mistakes to make sure everything was distributed fairly. The next day, Suzu grew curious when she noticed Ikuto heading off somewhere early in the morning. At the local school, Chikage, Shinobu, and Machai were seen teaching different subjects. And to Suzu's surprise, Ikuto turned out to be the math teacher. What he didn't realize was that many of the girls attending his class were there just to impress him. Later that evening, Suzu openly admitted to Ikuto that she disliked both school and math. Instead of pushing her, he chose to honor her feelings. Meanwhile, the other teachers gathered to figure out a way to encourage Suzu to come to school. Despite her disinterest, they genuinely believed that education would benefit her future. Though hesitant at first, Ikuto agreed to support their plan after seeing how much they cared. The following day, while walking through the village, Suzu and Ikuto ran into a group of island girls who were secretly trying to get Suzu to go to school. Sensing their scheme, Suzu attempted to slip away, but she was caught off guard when she was suddenly sent sliding into a classroom. Irritated but trapped, she tried to escape, only to be gently stopped by her friends. They pleaded with her to give school a try. Touched by their effort and sincerity, Suzu reluctantly agreed, realizing that they believed in her and wanted the best for her. Back at school, she was warmly welcomed and soon discovered that Ikuto was the one teaching her math. With that, her attitude began to shift, and she found herself inspired to start learning. The next day, Ikuto found himself buried in exhausting physical labor, while Suzu wandered the shoreline in search of seaweed. During her search, she stumbled upon a bottle washed ashore, containing a letter from Ikuto's sister, Misaki. Alarmed and hopeful, Suzu rushed back to deliver the message. Upon reading it, Ikuto learned that Misaki had been trying to find him at sea, but had ended up lost herself. Fueled by determination, Ikuto tried once again to confront the whirlpools that had trapped him on the island, but the ocean's fury turned him back. Refusing to give up, he came up with a daring idea: to fly over the water using a massive kite. With Suzu's encouragement helping him push past his fear of heights, Ikuto took off, soaring through the sky while a crowd watched in awe. His flight, however, was cut short by a sudden tornado that hurled him off course. Not one to surrender easily, Ikuto and the others began work on a new strategy, a giant slingshot. But even this wild plan failed to get him across the whirlpools. Taka eventually showed up and crushed any remaining hope by revealing that even birds couldn't cross the violent currents. Meanwhile, Machai proposed a dangerous alternative, a spiritual ritual that would separate Misaki's soul and bring her back, but only if Ikuto agreed to marry her. Just as the ritual was about to begin, An barged in and disrupted everything. In the chaos that followed, Chikage brought in a genie and urged Ikuto to make a wish, but even that plan fell through, leaving him emotionally drained. As tensions rose, the girls began competing for Ikuto's attention. But Suzu's heartfelt outburst calling for peace struck a nerve. Overwhelmed by everything, she fled. Ikuto went after her, and together they encountered the island's wise old woman. She claimed to know the secret to leaving the island, but warned that the price could be steep. Burdened by guilt, Suzu confessed her inner conflict, saying she didn't want Ikuto to leave, even though Misaki was still in danger. Later that evening, Ikuto apologized for everything, but Suzu assured him she understood. She then revealed what the old woman had told them about the escape path, leaving Ikuto torn between loyalty to his sister and his growing bond with Suzu. The elderly woman disclosed their only escape. They had to seek out the sea dragon god on Dragon Island by unlocking his hidden temple atop Mount Fuji. According to ancient tales, acquiring the key required surviving a series of dangerous trials. Although initially reluctant, Ikuto realized this was their only chance at freedom and agreed to proceed. At dawn, he and Suzu set out for Mount Fuji, unaware that Rin, Chikage, and Yukino were secretly trailing them, intent on halting their journey. Their path led them into a trap, a sprawling maze, but Rin, torn by her feelings, subtly helped guide them toward safety. Just when it seemed they would break free, a sealed door blocked their route. At that moment, the pursuing trio closed in, triggering Chikage's plan. A massive boulder was unleashed, barreling toward everyone, including Rin and Yukino. Amid the chaos, An appeared and challenged Ikuto to a duel. Ignoring the provocation, Ikuto pressed forward with Suzu, dodging the deadly rock until Tiger, the Lord of the North, intervened, deflecting it toward Chikage instead. Though grateful, Ikuto remained wary of Tiger's true motives. From him, they learned that 4 powerful guardians protected the sea dragon god. Mei soon arrived to aid them against Tiger, and together they gained a brief advantage before Mei and Tono confronted Tiger head-on. Further along the path, they encountered the Lord of the East, who had been bribed by Machai to delay them. By sheer luck, Shinobu got involved, and, after a misunderstanding, ended up fighting the Eastern Lord, allowing Ikuto and Suzu to press on. Eventually, they came across Suzu's master in disguise, who used his clones to challenge them. Ikuto managed to identify the real one by his 2 tails and defeated him. Upon reaching the summit of Mount Fuji, they finally found the key only for Karaj to appear and claim it as the Guardian of the West. Refusing to back down, Ikuto faced Karaj in battle. Though outmatched at first, Suzu's sacrifice reignited his determination. Their fierce clash ended with Ikuto's victory, securing the key and strengthening his resolve to escape the island. Upon reaching Dragon Island, the group finally arrived at the fabled sea dragon god's temple, holding a mysterious key in hand. As they descended the ancient stone steps, a sudden, ear-splitting scream shattered the eerie calm. They initially thought it was the sea dragon god's voice, until they spotted An, who had stowed away on the journey and hilariously managed to wedge her head into the ceiling. Meanwhile, Ikuto and Suzu made it to the bottom of the temple, where they discovered a vast, mystical lake said to be the home of the sea dragon god. Unbeknownst to them, An had stealthily slipped into the lake, hoping to secretly make a wish. Unfortunately, her actions accidentally triggered complete chaos. Inside the underwater cavern, she mistook the god's whisker for a rope and yanked on it, unknowingly causing it to snap and the surrounding structure to begin collapsing. As the temple began to crumble and An resurfaced, the others realized her accidental blunder. Amid a raging storm, the island girls erupted in celebration, interpreting the chaos as a divine sign that Ikuto's departure had been derailed, meaning he might stay and potentially choose one of them. Elsewhere, Machai watched the unfolding drama through her shikigami, seeing Ikuto already out at sea in a small boat. Suzu offered to go with him, but Ikuto gently refused, worried for her safety. As he sailed away, Suzu initially supported his decision, until the island's elderly matriarch challenged her to confront her true feelings. Inspired by love, Suzu dashed after him, only to see his boat vanish into a massive whirlpool. Determined not to lose him, Suzu dove back into the sacred shrine to pray for Akuto's safety. Her prayers seemed to work as Akuto resurfaced with help from Machai's magic. But his relief was short-lived. Surrounded by a group of unfamiliar and intimidating men, Akuto suddenly noticed his sister Misaki among them, completely bewildered by her presence. Misaki explained that after her shipwreck, she had ended up on Aren 2, an island much like his, except it was inhabited solely by men who had taken her in. She invited Akuto to join her and live on her island, but he refused, declaring he had to return to his own island because someone he deeply cared about was waiting for him. Misaki reluctantly accepted his decision, and the men provided Akuto with a boat for his journey home. Battling ferocious waves that seemed determined to block his return, Akuto pressed on, driven by thoughts of Suzu. Just as it seemed he might make it back, the whirlpool swallowed him once again. Eventually, the storm died down, and Suzu found Akuto unconscious, washed up on the shore. Overcome with relief and joy, she threw her arms around him. The reunion was barely complete when the island's old granny gleefully declared the second round of the hide-and-seek contest had begun, and in a flash, the island girls were off, chasing after Akuto all over again. If you enjoyed this recap, clap the like button and insult the main character like a true Aniskull fan. Also, subscribe to the channel if you're yet to for more plot-filled adventures. If you like anime recaps like this, watch this video right here.